Hey there, I hope you are doing great. In this video, we'll see how to create a countdown timer in React. This is a very common component and has multiple use cases. We can use this on a e-commerce site to show when the sale will begin, when the sale will end. It can also be used on an OTP verification page to show user or to notify user that the given OTP will expire in this amount of time. This can also be used on an OTT platform or streaming website to give user idea like the next show will premium in this amount of duration or time or countdown, whatever we say. So based on this, I have picked this component. Let's see how we can implement this, provided that in an interview we are asked to create this. So I have created a features list. The features are categorized in two categories. One is must have. You have to implement the must have to pass the interview. Let's assume that. And then second is nice to have. If you can implement the nice to have, it's a very it provides you an edge in the interview, showcasing that you can build things in a given amount of time. So let's go through the list in the must have. The first thing is the duration will be provided in milliseconds. I personally find working with numbers like milliseconds easy, because all we have to do is perform a simple calculation to show the countdown rather than working with date and time object. The second thing is we have to show the countdown for days, hours, minutes and seconds, not beyond that. And the third thing is our component will accept a callback function, and that callback function will be triggered when the countdown will expire, or it will reach 00. In the nice to have section, we have two extra features. One, we have an option to restart the countdown. So let's say if you are using this component on an OTP page or on a login form where you enter your mobile number and then an OTP is sent on a mobile number. So suppose user forgets to add the OTP. Then after the countdown expires, there will be an option to restart the countdown. And during the restart, our component will accept a callback function that will be invoked before the countdown restarts. So in that callback function, you can make your API call and send the OTP again. So assuming this, I have created this features list. We'll be reusing this component when we'll be creating the login form. So that's why I thought it's better that we implement this during this component itself, all the features, rather than doing it again. So let's start creating this. Let me install create React app or create a new create React app. So meanwhile it's getting created, let me explain you the logic behind how we'll be creating this. Whenever we see or when we read the problem statement, right, countdown timer, the first thing that comes to our mind is we can use a set interval timer and we can implement this. So all we have to do is we have to run the interval, and the interval will continuously be called after 1 second and it will be reducing the time. But that's not the case. Well, we can use set interval, but it's not required. All we have to do is, so if you understand the React lifecycles very good, you'll realize that we don't necessarily have to use a set interval timer. We can use the setTimeout itself and create this component. So let's go through the useEffect hook and understand the React lifecycle events. So React comes with certain set of lifecycles. These lifecycle events are invoked at certain part when the component based on the component's life or the activity. So the useEffect hook, which is provided to us, is will get called on certain lifecycle events. The first is mount. So mount event is called when your component is about to get added in the DOM. Similarly, unmount will be called when your component is about to get removed from the DOM. Then there is before update. So when your component is about to update, the useEffect will be called again. And finally update. So if there is any change in the state of the component and you have added that state as a dependency for useEffect hook, then useEffect hook will be called again. So here's the structure of the useEffect hook. Let's go through that. In the use effect hook, so the use effect hook will be called at least once in the component when it's about to mount. Then after that, the use effect hooks accepts a dependency array. So in this dependency array, suppose if you pass a state and this state gets updated, so the use effect will be called again. And inside the use effect hook, there is a return method. This will be called every time for cleanup. So let's say if your component is about to update, this will be invoked and you can perform your cleanup operations here. Like you can stop the timer, you can clear the intervals, you can do your memory leak cleanups, all those things. And finally, when the component is about to unmount, this will be called for the last time and you can do all your cleanup over here. So let's go through the flow. If you see, when we create our countdown timer, we'll be using a state to monitor the duration of that is passed to us in the millisecond. That duration will be stored in a state and we'll add that state as a dependency to the use effect hook. So the first is the component is mounted, the use effect hook is called. Inside the use effect hook, we'll run a setTimeout. That setTimeout will run after 1 second. And inside the setTimeout, we'll update the state, we'll reduce this milliseconds, the duration that we have received by 1000. So reducing it by 1000 means we have removed 1 second from the duration. Then after the state update, this dependency array will update because we have passed the duration as a duration state as a dependency to the use effect. So the use effect hook realizes that the component is about to update. So it runs the return method first. In the return method, we can clear the ID of the set timeout because we no longer need that. It has already updated the state. And then the use effect will be called again. So before component updates, we clear the timer. After update, repeat 1, 2, 3 again. So the moment the component updates, the use effect will be called again. It will run a timer. It will update the state. Before the component gets updated, we'll clear the timer and it will keep on repeating that in a loop. So it's making a recursive calls. Finally, we'll add a condition to terminate this recursion. So we'll check if the duration is 0, then stop the further state updates. So if your duration becomes 0, just clear the timer. There is no further state updates and your component will stop updating. So this is the logical part of it. Let's see how we can implement the same in the code. So I think our create React app is ready. Let's change the directory. Let's start the application. And it's running over here. Let's open this. Inside the source, let me create a folder named as timer. And inside that, let me create a file. Sorry. Now, according to our implementation, let's create a React state and use state and use effect hook. So based on the features, a component will accept a duration and a callback function which will be called on expire. Now we can store this in a state of the component. So we can store the duration in that and we can implement the use effect hook. Sorry. And we can pass the dependency arrays, like whenever the time changes, it will be called again. So inside that, let's create setTimeout. And we'll update the state. After 1 second, we'll reduce 1000 from the time, that is 1 second. Now a final condition to stop the update, further updates. So if the time is less than equal to 0, we have to clear the timeout. And finally, on the cleanup, useEffect returns a function, and inside that function we can clear the timeout on every before update and on unmount. The final thing in the final condition is if the timer stops or we have expired the countdown, we have to trigger the callback. So we can do that too, and we can invoke that. Let's name it. So this is the break condition, and this is our cleanup. Now if I save this, you'll see, are we getting a warning? We are not getting for the on expire. So that's a good thing. Otherwise, we can pass that in the dependency array. It does not matter. Finally, we can print this time. Sorry, not the time already, the time. Let me set a default props over here in case we don't. So the duration, let's say 62,000. Now let me explain you this before we run this component. So how we can calculate the duration. Let's say values in milliseconds. Now so 1 second is equal to 1000 milliseconds. Then 1 minute equals to 60 into second. Then 1 hour equals to 60 into minute. And then 1 day equals to 24 into hour. So using this calculation, we can convert our millisecond to a human readable format. It's very easy to work with this rather than working with a date and time object. And during the interviews, if you are not fully aware about the object or the methods, it's better you keep these things very simple. And if you can get that, if you can get thing worked with simple calculations, it's quite good. So let's do that. Let's run this component. Let's call that, invoke that in the app. Let me remove this. Let's import our timer. Day is assigned but never used. Where is the logo? Let me remove that. In the app.css, let me remove all the styles, and let's add a margin to this. 20 pixel 0, or let me add a 100 pixel margin, and then increase the font size so that we can read it properly. So if you see, the timer is running, it's reducing the value by 1000 every time. Now it's saying that React hook is missing a dependency on expire. Let's add that. It will not affect the application because it's a static value. It won't change. So if you pass that, it will remain like that throughout the component lifecycle. So if you see the state has become 0, the countdown has expired. Let's create a function and see if it is getting invoked on when the count or the countdown expires or not. Let's create that. Let's pass that. If we want, we can pass the duration from here itself. Let's pass 20 seconds for now and reload. So see 2019 goes on. We'll see if console.log gets printed or not. 9. Okay, so it's getting printed. So we have finished implementing the must have part. Let's format this number to a human readable format. Back to the index.js. This will accept the time and format that. Now using the same formula, right, where we have calculated the durations for second, minute, hour and day, we can convert that back. We can convert the given time back to human readable format. So for the day, let's say days. All we have to do is we have to get the floor value of the time divided by our constant day. So how many milliseconds are there in day? This will return us the amount, the day in the duration. Similarly, we can get the hours. But for the hours, what we want is, we already got our days. Now we just want the remaining hours. So from the time, we have to first remove the days and then get the hours. So let's get the reminder, remove the day, and then see how many hours are there. Same goes for minutes and seconds. The minutes and seconds, we can remove the hour and then get the, it's hour, minute. Similarly here we can get minute and second. Now let's run this, see how it goes. Save. Let's return this rather than time and pass the time over here. So it's working as it is, as expected. Let me update the time over here. Let's make it 2 minutes. Sorry, that will be a 60 into 2. Bad. This is working for minutes and seconds. Similarly, you can increase it for hour. You refresh, now it's going for 1 hour. And the same way you can increase it for the day. That's seconds, minutes, hours. We have 24 hours. So see, we got our timer. It's running perfectly. Now you can format it however you want. I'm keeping it as it is. Now let's implement the nice to have part. Let's create a wrapper around that. And inside this we'll have two functions. One is to restart the timer whenever it expires, and the second is we can pass a callback function. So before restarting the timer, the callback function will be invoked. So keeping that in mind, I just need a state, then we can implement that and a wrapper. Now as it is a wrapper around timer, it will accept the basic two properties of the timer plus one extra property which will be invoked before we are restarting. So duration, then on expire, and before restart. All we have to do is false, and then we can return, so we can get the time of here. And then we can return it. Duration on expire becomes expire. Now this timer will run when it has not expired. Otherwise, we'll show a button to reset the timer. So let's implement that condition. If it has not expired, so this timer will run. Otherwise, we'll generate a button. Restart. Now, on click, it will do handle restart. Let's create handle restart. So this handle restart, what it will do is it will set expire to false, but we have to set it true when the timer expires. So as we are passing this function directly, rather than that, what we can do is we can create a helper over here. And inside this, we can set the on expire plus we can set this, or we can update the state of this component, and we can set that it has expired, and we can pass this over here. Now let's go to our timer, remove this default props, we no longer need that. Let's go to the app.js. Rather than importing timer, we'll import the timer wrapper over here, and let's pass that. So just to check, I'm reducing the duration to 10. So let's say 10, 9. So it should print the expired, this one, because we are passing it over here to the wrapper. See, the expired is printed. We get the button restart. The moment I click that, the timer will run again. 9, 8, 7. I think we are done. I hope you have learned something today. Thank you all.